Hello, and welcome to Practical Ideas for Growth. I am Sarah Dobick, and today I'm very excited to welcome Calvin Hedman, founding member and managing partner of Hedman Partners. Welcome, Calvin.
Hi, Sarah. Thanks for the invitation. I look forward to our discussion.
Thank you. Well, I know more and more managing partners or firm leaders are focusing on their efforts to develop a growth culture, and we're happy to count you among that number for sure. And we know that you've got more than 30 years of experience in the accounting profession and historically have been one of the primary rainmakers in your firm, not the only one. And so we invited you to join to talk a little bit more about that from your perspective. And really, we met a little over a year ago, and you met some members of our team, just started doing more business development training. And I know that you're a big proponent of building a growth culture. And so our hope today is just to spend a little time picking your brain and having you share that with our listeners.
Great.
So what was the aha moment that drove you to establish, a growth culture among your team? Like what really drove you to kind of reach out and go, we need to do something about this?
Yeah, that was probably a few years ago that I realized, we need to do something different because it wasn't working. Um, my background, I was lucky enough to start at a firm, at an office where the managing partner really encouraged business development. I'm going to get it out there right now, Sarah. It's sales. It's really sales, right?
Yes, it is.
We have all these terms: business development, practice development, all these, but it's sales. It's a five-letter word. We treat it as a four-letter word, but he was a big proponent of business development, and so I was able to get involved early on in my career and had some success. And so when I started this firm, I realized, I want to do that same type of encouragement for everyone to get involved in sales. And so we even have within our process for as new employees start, 30 days after they start, I'll sit down with them and just do a check-in. But a big part of that is really just to talk to them about business development or sales and how they at any level can be part of that. And then I follow that up with some articles that I've gathered over the years. But a few years ago, we had one of our, back to answer your question, we had a partner who retired, and so we needed to replace him. And at the same time, we were growing, and so we were looking at promoting some of the other team members. And through that process, we realized, we've done a great job of training them from a technical standpoint, but we did a terrible job of training them from a sales standpoint. And so I said, it's not working. We need to do something different. And so we said, well, let's look at what's out there. Let's look at a more formalized program that's not just dependent on us because we get so busy with other things, but something that has structured and goes back to the basics, because even partner level, manager level, and then even below that, they have no idea. So that's when we started looking at what's the options out there, and that's how we got to you, Sarah.
Awesome. Thank you. Um, what value? I mean, I know a lot of firms talk about this concept, right? And they all want people to have business development skills. And I love that you said, whatever we were doing wasn't working. We're a big proponent of, looking at that and changing things. But what value do you think that an investment like this brings when everybody can start to contribute into growth instead of just, a couple of primary people in the firm?
Yeah, I think it really makes everyone see that it's a team effort, that everyone is helping with the growth of the firm, and it really makes them feel that they want to be part of that and get involved earlier, as opposed to just, oh, that's their job, my job is to do this, and eventually I'll get to that. But you need to encourage that and involve them early on, and by having everyone involved and having little successes, even if it's just, hey, I went to lunch with someone and we talked about this. It's getting them involved with that early really makes it a much easier process.
Yeah, I like that you talked about you start from the day that they hire. When I first started in my first role, I think they thought I was nuts when we started training, the second that they walked in the door. But I couldn't agree more that it truly builds a mindset around growth to think about it differently. But I think it also gets them excited a little bit earlier on about that. And I think it's important to have people excited about it, which is sort of to me an oxymoron, because usually most accountants go into doing what they do because they don't want to do that, 5 letter scary word sales.
Right. That's right.
How do you get people, or how have you found ways to get people excited within your culture around doing this? Because sometimes we get a lot of pushback, a little resistance, like, you want me to do what? Not what I signed up for.
Right. Well, you're exactly right. And it's scary for a lot of them. And quite frankly, there are some people that you can't force this on them, and you have to recognize them, and you give them a pass, and you just understand, and have that honest discussion with them. And so you recognize that. I'll go back. Actually, the partner who retired was a partner when he came on. He said, look, I will do whatever you need done, but I don't want to do sales. He goes, you bring in all the business you want. I'll make sure it gets done, but I don't want to be involved in sales. And so we had that understanding. But as we were looking to replace him, we saw that we needed those skills with him, because the firm's growing. We now have 7 partners. And so everyone needs to be part of that. And so that's part of that encouragement of early on talking with individuals, getting them over that fear that they have with it. Some people, walking into a room full of strangers, that's the worst fear. That's almost worse than public speaking to some of them. And it's really just breaking it down and just saying, look, all you're going to do is just smile and ask some questions, right? And it's that icebreaker. And you guys do a good job with that training on that.
Yeah. It's funny. Nobody would believe this, but when I graduated from college, I wanted to do anything but sales, which is funny because that's a huge portion of my job today. But I literally thought that sales was cold calling. I thought it was dialing for dollars. Those were the jobs I was getting pitched out of college as a marketing major. And they say, oh, you could go make 200 phone calls a day. And I was like, that sounds horrible to me. Like, I ran the other direction. I want to do marketing strategy because it doesn't involve sales. And it sounds like I had a great mentor in my first position that really showed me sales was the exact opposite of what I really thought it was about. It was really about helping people in those conversations. So I think that's great.
Yeah, I always say it's really just relationships, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's you build a relationship, you build a trust. And I'll give you a funny story. So early on in my career, I was probably a 2-year person or something. And, the managing partner encouraged getting involved in different organizations. So I looked in the community here where I live, and there was a business organization. So I said, well, let me try that out. It's a lunch meeting. So I went in, signed in, and first person I meet is the owner of this company out here, right? And he goes, you know what? We're considering changing CPAs. I'm going, man, this is easy.
That's what we call falling in your lap, and it doesn't happen very often. But
well, the end of that story is, so I was going great. So brought out a partner, we proposed on him, and we didn't get the work. We did not win that bid. But he said, look, periodically I always evaluate this. So, stick around. And the moral of that story is, so I did. I stuck around, developed a relationship with him. And so then 3 years later, when he said, hey, we're considering making a change again, we won that. And then I served that, or the firm served that company probably for 12 years before he sold it. So it's, again, back to relationships is what it really
absolutely. Well, so having been here before, and you clearly are in the thick of it now, I know that making these changes are never easy, right? It's one thing to hire somebody to help you train. It's another thing to actually shift your culture. What are some of the struggles you've had in sort of making this shift and actually just not just doing the training, but doing the training and using the training and encouraging that?
Yeah, and it's a process that I think will continue forever. But you kind of alluded to it earlier. Is there are some people that are resistant, right? Why do I need to do this on top of everything else I'm busy with? And it's really helping individuals recognize that it's important, it's critical, especially for the firm in general, right? Because I always say that if you're not growing, you're dying, right? Because the current clients you have, you're not going to have them forever. Some of those are going to be sold, they're going to leave, whatever it is. And if you want to grow, so you need to recover not only the ones that you might lose, but you need additional growth beyond that. And so, it it's really a mindset that you have to have at the forefront. It's not like, okay, now we're busy season. Okay, now we got 2 months that we can market. No, no, no. It's marketing, sales all year round. It's being involved with people just in general, and just recognizing when there's opportunities that you can bring up the business side of things. Or the other thing I find very interesting is, um, bankers are typically a good referral source for us. And so you can tell that bankers, I think, get lonely there for a while with respect to CPAs, because, they're always trying to reach out, can you get together for lunch or this or that? And I typically try to schedule lunches all year round. And they're always kind of surprised, like, oh, you're available to go lunch. And so you might get a scoop on something, an opportunity that other people aren't, because they're not willing to continue to do that, even though you're busy with other things during different times of the year.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. I felt like we picked up so many opportunities because we would be willing to have those meetings. And they wouldn't maybe be at the same level of frequency that they were outside of that. But I'll be honest, there is no non-busy season anymore.
Oh,
It just doesn't exist anymore for public accounting. And so figuring out that balance, I mean, there's definitely heavy extension and heavy deadline season, and there's still that 6 weeks or so around some of those timeframes that really have a big impact. But I don't know a single time of year that is just not busy. There's something going on or something that needs to be focused on now
yeah,
for most firms.
right.
So, um, what about your team? What have you noticed to be some of the challenges that the team is facing through this transition?
Well, a big part of it is scheduling it, right? Is scheduling not only from a training standpoint of doing the training, but then implementing what they've learned with respect to it. And so, um, it's I think that, that initial fear is taken care of kind of just through that whole process, and seeing that, oh, this isn't going to be that hard with respect to it. But then going that step further. And so one thing that we've what I've tried to do is um, encourage the more experienced partners and managers to take along and invite those with less experience onto meetings or lunches or those types of things. So
Yeah,
I noticed
absolutely.
my light went off there. So
Oh, yeah, that's okay. You might have to move a little. It looks like it's automatic, but
mhm.
I agree. I think it's the biggest sign, and I'll tell you, as a seasoned rainmaker, and anybody that's been doing this for a long time, it is hard sometimes to schedule it in. You've got to be super intentional about all of those things. And I love that you have people shadowing, because as adults, I feel like most of us learn best by watching and seeing. There's so much we soak in. I remember shadowing my former managing partner on tons of meetings and never saying a word for the longest time. And then when I finally spoke, I was able to do it, somewhat intelligently, at least, having soaked it all in from some of that.
Yeah.
Um, so, what do you wish someone had told you before you started this journey, this more formalized journey of building this culture within your firm, and training and development around this?
Yeah, I guess actually, it was something that I learned through the process, right? And implemented as we went along is, um, as I mentioned, it's hard for people to schedule. And so, with the training, and yeah, I like the way you have a periodic check-in and the peer-to-peer calls and stuff. And so, in what the difficulty I saw some people have is they wouldn't necessarily schedule their training and get it done each week. And so they might wait towards the end with that. And so what I learned in doing that is, okay, we're going to have each week a call, an internal call that I would just follow up with people and talk about, what the lesson was. And so it's really setting that structure myself, the structure to help those that are getting trained to make sure that they're understanding it, that they're getting it done, and that we go on this path together as opposed to people doing it at different levels. So.
Yeah, I love that you guys do that. We talk about it all the time, but I think there's lots of training in the profession. We are not the only people that provide any form of training. And one of the things I see is we make huge investments into training, but we don't actually take that next step to say, okay, how are we talking about the application of this? How are we going to bring it in? I'd rather spend a heck of a lot less on training and spend more of that time on how are we actually applying this and how are we using it to move forward, because that's really where you see most of the impact coming. So I love that you guys are doing that. If somebody else, another partner firm leader listening to this conversation was wondering, if they're ready, what would you say to them? How do you help them figure out, are we ready to do this? Knowing what some of the challenges lay ahead, because I don't think you guys are unique. I think many of your other peers probably sit in the same position.
Yeah, as the Nike slogan, just do it. I mean, there's always a reason or an excuse as to, well, we got to get through a deadline and this. Well, yes, you have to get through those deadlines, and the training is scheduled around those deadlines, so it can be fit in. But there's always a reason not to do it. But it's really just a matter of making that decision and going forward with it. It's one of those, I'm sure you've all experienced it, where after you've gone through something, you're like, wow, I'm glad I did that. I wasn't really looking forward to it, but now that I look back, it's really helped me. It's advanced my career. It's given me a different perspective on things. And so it's really, again, just do it.
Yeah, that's awesome. I like it. I think the best slogan ever created on earth was by Nike.
Yes.
Talk about brand strategy. So, well, Calvin, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate you sharing your perspectives and your overall experience with this. So thank you to our listeners, and you can also find this on our podcast.
Thank you, Sarah.